What was your original plan for the collaboration?
My original plan was to work in a studio environment in my old high school, working in the sixth form centre, because my current theme was a bit explicit for the younger students. What my aim was to work with the students' ideas and opinions about their fears and phobias, and then I'd make work off that, and at the end I'd make an exhibition, perhaps at the John Peel Centre, to display mine and the students' work.
How did you get in contact with Stowmarket High School?
Stowmarket High School was my last school I went to before I went to university, so I was quite close to the teachers there, especially in the art department. So I simply had my teacher's email address still, so I got in contact with them by emailing them and arranging meetings. So every week I'd go in and talk to my teachers about what I was going to do and what plans I was going to do. I created a proposal of what I wanted to do originally, and then it went from there really.
How did you decide on a theme for your project?
Okay, so I started looking at my current practice that I've been doing in the studios, which is looking at how the media portrays women as sex objects. So I looked at the ways of objectification in women, and I looked at how it affects my anxiety issues. So my biggest fear is being watched and being looked at, and I always think I'm being followed. So I took that and then made the theme of my biggest fear, and I thought it was a very relatable subject. Everyone's got a phobia or a fear, so I thought we could start and work from that.
How did you get started on the collaboration?
At the beginning I went into the school unscheduled, and I just went and talked to any available student that was around in the area. I started asking the students around what their biggest fears were, and I started to get them to write on these cards, and all the common fears came up, like spiders, clowns, drowning and things like this. I found it really hard actually to keep in contact with the same students because they weren't always around, and I really wanted to connect with them to make pieces, and I wanted them to make pieces back, so it was hard not having the same students around.
How did you resolve the problem?
I went to the head of art and I said that I needed something that was more structured, that I could come in every week and I'd be with the same students. So what I did was I began to explain who I was to the students, and this was on a Tuesday morning. I did a presentation about my work and what I wanted to achieve, and in this presentation we started talking about common fears. And then what we did was we also got these cards again, and on one side I wanted them to write their fears, and on the other I wanted them to write their ambitions and their dreams. The problem I then faced was working with these kids continuously. Are they going to get bored? So I started looking at the artist Joel Millerchip, who does these big black and white collages of all these images, and that means that every week these kids would have to think of new ideas and new images and new inspiration for me, talking about their fears and their ambitions. So I began by creating my own piece here, and every week the idea would be that the kids would draw their fears and they'd draw their ambitions on these pieces. So each week when I went in, I'd have more ideas to work with for my pieces that I was going to create.
How did you make work from the students' ideas?
Okay, so every Tuesday morning I would go in with these students and they'd be working on their A2 pieces, and I would go around talking to them, thinking that I was going to make pieces about their fears and phobias. And to begin with, that is what I started looking at. And for example, with this one here, it says, "When people are watching you, you can feel it." This was actually inspired by my biggest fear, which was obviously the idea of people watching me. But there was a boy in the class that his biggest fear, and he was petrified that people were watching him all the time, and he felt really self-conscious of it. So what I did is I got pictures of people that are looking directly at you, and I really wanted the viewer to think that they were being stared at as well. I used mixed media and worked alongside this student making this piece, and this one took about 2 sessions to do. I wanted to do collage because it was quick and easy, and I could do it within the lesson so that the kids could watch over me doing it and to respond to their pieces, to think of other ideas for their A2 pieces that they were going to create.
What was the idea behind your piece, "I Can Feel Your Gaze"?
This piece was my original piece that I brought into the class the first week. I wanted to show them this piece because it's my style, what I've been working in for a couple of semesters now at university. And also I wanted them to see my fears so they'd open up to me more about their different fears and phobias that they didn't like, because obviously at the beginning I needed a lot of ideas to get me started on planning what paintings I was going to do, and they also needed a lot of ideas to start their A2 pieces as well. So I used people from images that I've sourced from the internet, and again with the previous piece I was talking about, all direct gaze at the viewer. I just wanted it to be a piece that you can really relate to, really, because obviously this is how I feel all the time with my anxiety. I always think that people are following me and watching me, so I really wanted to get that across to the viewer.
Was there any common fears that came up when working with the students?
Yeah, there was a lot of girls in my class, and when I asked them what their biggest fear was, it was that they weren't good enough or they weren't pretty enough, and they were scared they were going to turn fat when they woke up in the morning. And there was loads that were very image conscious of themselves, and it links into my current practice at university, thinking about how the media portrays us and how women are always, you know, made to feel that they're not good enough all the time. So I made this piece, which is kind of a tribute to like a old-fashioned sign painting, so obviously taking into consideration the advertising side and the media. And what I did was I wrote beauty parlour because being yourself isn't good enough, and I just wanted to show how these girls felt like they were always comparing themselves to these women in the media and these supermodels and people on films. And then I started to do my own, which is called Pray Media, Be Media, and this is just a quick collage I did within the class, and it was about, I made it more personal to me because there's lots of people in the media that I look at and I think, oh, I should be like them. So I chose one of the women that I really wanted to be like, and I'm constantly comparing myself to, and made it more personal, which I could link in with the girls in the class, and I just created this with them.
Did anything surprising come up when you were working with the students?
It did actually. I went into the class thinking that I was going to be mainly focusing on the fears and the phobias, but at the beginning obviously I did these cards that like things that they wanted, their dreams and their fears on the outside. I went round looking at these cards, and the things that they wanted were very materialistic at their age. They were like, I want the best job, I want the biggest house, I want a BMW, and all of these things, and it made me think how much pressure there is on these kids to have the best job at that age. I mean, when I was that age I was just thinking about how many animals I wanted to collect and things like that. So to think that they've grown up in this world where they're surrounded by things like, you've got to have this, you've got to own that. So with that I started creating these pieces, which again are referencing sign painting really, and this one says, what we own will forever own us, because all they wanted to do was work in the best job so they could get the best items. They wanted huge houses, and it was just showing how materialistic we're becoming. And I started to do other collages about all we want is to want, and putting typical celebrities that are always shown in the media having all of these expensive items and shopping all the time. And it just goes to show really how all of these reality programs and everything that we watch now are always focused on the most successful people and the people that have so much money, that these kids that are growing up now, that's all they can think about. All they think about is, I've got to have the best everything, because that's how people in the media portray to having the best car, best house, best job.
What artists did you look at in terms of style?
I started looking at artists that did mostly mixed media collages, sourcing their imagery from pre-existing. All of my imagery that I've used throughout all my pieces, I've got out of magazines and the internet. I focused on Rauschenberg because he uses a lot of found images, and his style, he uses paint with different textures, and obviously he uses found images. Also looked at the artist Mario Wagner, because he also does a lot of collage with painting, and he does quite large scale works as well, which obviously links into my first painting I did, which was quite a big mixed media piece.
Where did the ideas for the sign paintings come from?
Well, these started off as just ideas and slogans, and I thought the best way to put them across is simply just to say out how it is. Basically, there's a artist that used to be local to here, and he calls himself Ornamental Conifer, and he's got very successful with doing sign paintings and started working for quite big brands. I've been quite familiar with his work, and it inspired me to do these ones here. I just like the bluntness of them, and I think they work really well just to get the message across.
Who did you look at in terms of context?
Well, I didn't really look at any artists as such, because most of my work is inspired by theories. The theorists that I was looking at included Laura Mulvey and Jean Kilbourne, and they focus on how the male gaze affects us, and how the media always show us in a particular light. Like, we're always seen as passive, and we're always seen as weak, and the men in the media are always shown as strong characters, and we're shown that we need these men to survive in our life. So my anxiety is kind of influenced by these kind of theories, and my work has been influenced by them. I always, obviously with my fear, have always been watched and followed. I never think that women are watching and following me. It's always the men that I feel are watching and following me, because they are the ones that are exposed to all these images of women. I always think that they must think that we are allowed to be taken control of, because that's all they see in the media. Also Jean Kilbourne, she looks at loads of different examples of advertising that clearly backs up these points, and with most high fashion editorial shoots, women are barely clothed, and they're always in passive poses. And obviously Laura Mulvey's theory of the male gaze just comes into this, that women are only made to pose like that for the male. Another aspect I was looking at in terms of context was the idea of how virtual we're becoming. So I started looking at Barbara Kruger's book Remote Control, and in this book she discusses the ideas of how virtual we are. For example, with music, we don't just have to hear it anymore, we have to see it. So within this idea of virtuality, it started coming through within the students. When I gave them their cards to write their likes and dislikes on, most of the students wrote down about 5 video games that they liked. So within my next term at the school, my work's going to be based about how virtual we are and how online based we are. This is what I took into consideration when preparing my presentation. I decided to talk to you through my camera instead of real life, to kind of demonstrate how our world is changing. While I was doing my collaboration, I started looking at artists that were very similar in the way that they collaborated. As I'd been working with the school and students, my experience was very personal, so it was quite hard to find people that would link in to my collaboration in terms of structure and content. I found the artist Hannah Burr, and she worked with the Museum of Fine Art, which is based in Boston. She got 8 students, and with these students she went into the museum, and out of the archive of the museum she got them to respond and be very personal and opinionated about the works. She chose students because they were very opinionated, and they all had very different individual ideas about the work. I felt it linked really well into what I've been doing over the few months, because with my collaboration I was basing it on ideas and thoughts and getting them to respond through drawing. I thought it linked really well and has really helped me to structure my collaboration.
What cautions do you have to take when working with children?
I had to complete an ethics form, and after that IB check, so I put that through. Another thing that I needed to consider was consent forms, in which when at the end I'm going to put an exhibition on, and for the students' work to be included I need to send a letter back with the student and get their parents to sign it. Another thing I was concerned about was documenting the children working with me. The school actually have a policy when the students start, they have to sign a piece of paper that says they're allowed to have their pictures taken, and obviously their parents sign that as well, so that was fine.
What are your future plans with the school?
Because I've only really just got started and got into it, because it was quite a slow process trying to fit in with the school's timetable, I'm going to carry on working with the children until the summer holidays, and at the end of that time, when I've gathered enough work and they've finished their pieces, I'm going to put on an exhibition in Stowmarket to put together both of our pieces with a theme of the media, how it affects our fears and how it affects how we are as people. I've started to design invites and plan how the evening's going to go already, although I'm not really sure what exact date the exhibition will be. It will probably be in June, so that's what I'm going to be planning on next.
Michaela has been teaching my age group for the past month. Through this experience she has gained lots of confidence in teaching and gathered important teaching experience. She has learned that students my age are under pressure by influences from the media and plans to continue making her work dealing with this issue.